Chile and Cyprus signed the Artemis Accords, bringing the total up to 47 nations. The CIA shut down an attempt by Lockheed Martin to share a retrieved non-human intelligence spacecraft. The Peruvian Congress has set a date to have public hearings on the study of the Nazca Mummies, which is going to be November 9, 2024. Visit to Romania's Bucegi Sphinx. What's hiding in the mysterious Bucegi Mountains? Whistleblowers and witnesses claim that humans have been living on Mars for decades in large caves and caverns. These stories and more in Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Welcome to the November 2nd edition of Exopolitics Today, the Week in Review. Quite a range of stories to cover. I just got back just a couple of days ago from my visit to Romania, and I will be talking about some of the things we discussed and talked about in interviews over there and some of our research findings. But first, let's begin with this story about Chile and Cyprus signing on to the Artemis Accords, bringing the total up to 47. So the growth in the Artemis Accords just demonstrate that as far as the international community is concerned, that the US is the leading nation for coordinating global space activities. So you compare that with the rapid growth of the BRICS alliance, where you have many nations wanting to join the BRICS, and that is a multinational alliance that really is trying to set up a rival economic system to the Western rules-based international system. But when it comes to space, many of the countries that are part of BRICS, and we're talking about countries like Brazil, India, that they actually have signed on to the Artemis Accords. They are not signing on to China's International Lunar Research Station initiative, which it launched in conjunction with Russia. And why is that? Well, I think the answer is because many nations understand that the US genuinely is going to share some of these advanced technologies that it has learned about in its classified programs, in its unacknowledged special access programs. And I have talked in the past about JP, the Army whistleblower or insider, who said that he went to an underground spaceport in the US. We believe that spaceport is somewhere in the vicinity of Green Mountain, Alabama, if not under it. And he says he saw 30 international pilots being trained to fly flying saucers with Nordic extraterrestrials. So you can imagine that the militaries of most countries that do aspire to become spacefaring nations, that they would really want to have access to such training programs. And I think that's what's being offered in the Artemis Accords, or being promised at some point in the Artemis Accords. And according to JP, these international pilots are being trained now. So I think many of the signatories to the Artemis Accords want to get into that. Whereas I think with China and Russia and its International Lunar Research Space Station initiative, this is not something that I think is going to lead to a lot of information sharing on the part of China, which has a reputation for stealing intellectual property, not sharing it. Well, here is something. It is a compilation of different testimonies or different stories by Jeremy Corbell and also George Knapp, where they talk about information they received concerning the CIA being the gatekeeper when it comes to the UFO phenomenon. And they talk about Lockheed Martin's efforts to share some of what it had retrieved, or it had gained possession of, in terms of a retrieved non-human intelligence spacecraft. So let me play the clip, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. I'll just play the first 40 seconds or so. It gives you an idea of what's going on.
I think it is entirely feasible that this UFO cover-up exists within a private company.
Lockheed Martin.
Or Lockheed.
Lockheed was one of those involved.
Lockheed wanted to divest their NHI, non-human intelligence, UAP or UFO materials, a material transfer of UAP that was supposed to happen to AAWSAP from Lockheed, and that was shut down specifically by CIA-involved individuals. And there's an individual who was head of science and technology at that time. This craft had a streamlined configuration suitable for aerodynamic flight, but no intakes, no exhaust, no wings or control surfaces. In fact, it appeared not to have an engine, fuel tanks, or fuel. So, is this what they were hoping to get to study from Lockheed? Do you know?
All right. Well, that gives you an idea of the role that the CIA plays in shutting down these kind of technology transfers that companies like Lockheed wanted to do. Now, I first heard of this almost 20 years ago. There was a book by Paul Laviolette where he talked about the Boeing company wanting to release anti-gravity technology so that it could build anti-gravity civilian spacecraft. So rather than the kind of jet-powered jumbo jets that Boeing was building 20 years ago, that Boeing Corporation wanted to release anti-gravity technology because it does have that technology in its Phantom Works division, that Boeing does build some reverse engineered craft, according to some of the sources that I've consulted, that the Boeing Corporation was shut down in doing that it was told point blank not to do it, and the CIA is the main culprit in ensuring that companies that do want to release some of these technologies are blocked in doing so. So the CIA definitely has been the gatekeeper. And that in this case, Lockheed Martin wanted to share a retrieved NHI spacecraft, that's a non-human intelligence spacecraft or a captured UFO, with the AAWSAP and the Defense Intelligence Agency in 2008. Now, that is very credible in my view, that when it comes to the CIA, it is quite a large organization, and we shouldn't be too general in how we depict the CIA playing a role in the cover-up, because the vast majority of CIA intelligence analysts or operatives have no idea about the UFO cover-up. But there is an entity in the CIA. It was traditionally the Counterintelligence Division that was set up under James Jesus Angleton in the kind of mid-1950s, from around 1954 up until 1972, when Angleton was replaced as the head of the Counterintelligence Division. And so this is the unit or the division within the CIA that has been the gatekeeper of the UFO secrecy, and that they have worked directly with the control group called Majestic 12 to keep everything secret. So today, now, I think that in the last 50 years, whether it continues to be controlled by the Counterintelligence Division or whether it's some special unit within the Clandestine Services Division, or maybe a combination of both, that the CIA still is the gatekeeper enforcer of UFO secrets. And so we know from what Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp were told, that in 2008, when Lockheed Martin tried to share some of this technology with AAWSAP and the Defense Intelligence Agency, it was blocked by the CIA. Now, here is a short segment featuring Phil Schneider, who first came into the public arena in 1955, and he was a very credible whistleblower. He worked as a civil engineer, directly involved in building underground facilities, and had access to some of the top secrets. And he talked not just about the 1933 UFO crash in Italy that is depicted as, or widely kind of seen as, probably one of the first or one of the most significant UFO crash retrieval operations in modern history. But he talked about another incident from 1909. So let me play this clip. It only goes for a minute. So let's play from the beginning.
Let me give you a brief overview. Start in ancient history land here. Back in 1909, the U.S. cavalry was engaged in catching some banditos that had crossed over the Mexican border into a place called Truth and Consequences, New Mexico. And they went into a cave or a hideout and killed the so-called bandits. But what they found out, they couldn't explain. And they were called horseshoe craft at that time, or horseshoe ships. There were UFOs, and they saw these, what they call demons, gray demons, or little gray guys all around the place. That was in 1909. Now, in 1933, our government was actively engaged with the Europeans, mostly the French and the English, and special researches dealing with aerial phenomena.
So there you have two very early cases of UFOs being retrieved, and the grey extraterrestrials that Phil Schneider had direct first-hand experience with. And so in 1909, as he said, that they encountered some of these greys in a cave after a shootout with some Mexican bandits. And he also talked about the 1933 case in Italy during Mussolini's regime. And in his interview, or in his presentation, Schneider talked about Britain and the US being involved or being knowledgeable about this 1933 crash in Italy. Now, the significant thing there is that corroborates that Benito Mussolini was actually talking with Winston Churchill about the 1933 UFO crash. And it's important to keep in mind that at that time, Italy, Germany, and Britain were allies, that they had been allies in the First World War. Italy was also a major aviation company or country at that time. So it is not surprising that they were sharing information. And so that, I think, is a very important piece of history. And unfortunately, soon after Schneider went public and began giving these lectures and showing some of the evidence that he had, he was suicided. That is, he was found dead. The coroner reported that it was a suicide, but there were a lot of anomalies suggesting that it wasn't suicide at all, that he had been murdered, that this was a case of termination with extreme prejudice, which is how the intelligence community refers to former operatives being treated if they go public. Right, well, here is the medbed medical treatment that JP underwent. That was released on Monday on YouTube and Rumble. The week earlier, it was released on Patreon. So for those that aren't subscribing to the Patreon channel, you could watch these on YouTube and on Rumble. And this medbed treatment really is significant because it suggests that a decision has been made that these medbeds are being rolled out, and that military veterans are first in the queue, that they are the ones that are going to be given the treatment first, and that this is especially the case for members of the covert community. So that's a good thing for vets, because many of them have had atrocious medical treatment at the hands of the Veterans Affairs. So now they're getting medbed treatment. And, there's always a question as to exactly what these medbeds, what it is that they are doing in full. But certainly people that have substantial physical injuries, I'm sure that they are very happy to undergo a medbed experiment or a medbed treatment, even if it's still unknown as to how the DNA is being influenced. Is the DNA being changed? These medbeds, I mean, I certainly would be very reticent to get into one until I knew exactly what it was. But if I was missing a limb or something, or suffering diabetes, severe diabetes or something, I probably wouldn't hesitate to get into one. So yeah, I think people's situations are different. So I certainly would like more information before I got into a med bed, but they are being rolled out. People with severe physical disabilities are going to benefit, and that's a good thing. All right, so here is Elena Danaan in her Star Nations News. So she presented some of the results of an investigation of what lies beneath the Romanian Sphinx. So Karina Pataki, Elena, myself, and three Romanian researchers were part of this investigation. And Karina Pataki had two friends as well that accompanied her. And so we went all over Romania. Well, we went to a number of different locations in Romania, investigating its ancient history, and claims that Romania was actually the starting point for human civilizations achieving a very high level and being dispersed after the Ice Age ended in the, I guess we're talking 9,600 BC. So we investigated different parts of Romania, and we went to the Bucegi Mountains. And of course, for those that are familiar with the Bucegi Mountains, this is the location where there is a hall of records hidden. And that was first revealed by Radu Cinema in his book, In Transylvania Sunrise. And what's interesting here is that Elena, she actually did a recording of some sounds emanating from beneath the Sphinx. There is a Sphinx-like structure there in Romania on the Bucegi Mountains, and beneath that is where we think there is this hall of records. And Elena also found some nearby pipes that were very likely used by the Romanian military in the secret excavations in that underground facility there underneath the Sphinx at the Bucegi Mountains. And so this was something she first released in Star Nations News, and I followed that up with an interview where I presented Elena and Karina's psychic projection under the Sphinx and their observations of what was found and its significance. So that is something that will come up very shortly. Okay, so this is a story about a UFO case in Australia, a very famous case in 1966, seen by multiple witnesses, many witnesses, even 100 witnesses, involving school children and teachers from Westall in Melbourne, Australia. And what was not known was that a secret report was created. So apparently a secret report was created but never was released. That's interesting. Now, I mean, people assume that the Westall report was the Westall UFO incident was very likely an example of non-human intelligence, extraterrestrials, visiting and interacting with school children, because it actually landed in the vicinity of the Westall elementary school. Now, this is where we have to raise another possibility. I'd like to raise another possibility that I learned from Stan Deyo, who is the very first whistleblower to start actually talking about a reverse engineering program of that was in existence. So he came out in the early 1970s, and he traveled to Australia, and he was sent to Melbourne to actually play a role in the anti-gravity research that was happening at Melbourne. And he was shown some craft. He was shown some evidence of spacecraft that was being reverse engineered or built there in Australia. So I think this is very significant that, we can't just assume that this 1966 case was just a NHI UFO witnessed by over 100 people, because nearby you have this Fisherman's Bend research facility that Stan Deyo visited, and he said that in the early 1970s that they were already well advanced in terms of their understanding and operationalization of anti-gravity technology. So that raises an interesting possibility. Was the Westall incident, did that involve a craft built by the Australian government? Okay, so here is some unfortunate development, and that is that a video interview I did with Gene Decode on the secret history of deep underground military bases that came out in June of this year, that YouTube just deleted it and said that it violated its terms of service because it constituted harassment and bullying. And I have no idea what in this video constituted harassment and bullying. It goes for about an hour and a half, and they did not give me a timestamp. They did not give me any indication exactly what they meant. It's simply gone. Thankfully, it is on Rumble. It was published on Rumble and Odyssey at the time, and now I just uploaded it also to Patreon. So for those of you that have joined my Patreon channel, that is one of the main reasons for creating it, is that there's no censorship, or I can put videos up there. I mean, it is behind a paywall, and I just assume that the paywall does help. It's not very much. I mean, for $7 a month, you get to watch all of my videos that I release on Exopolitics Today without any ads, without any censorship, and you get early access as well, 3-4 days before it appears on YouTube. So it really is a great deal, and it does support me and the channel. And it is, we're trying to do our best in giving you a professional video production, and that actually that is expensive. And so this is how you can help me in presenting quality videos, not just for the Week in Review, but also for the interviews that I do, by becoming a Patreon member. But definitely the censorship with YouTube is a concern. They gave me a warning. This is my second warning now. I have had a strike before after being given an earlier warning. And so now if they decide to retroactively remove any of my videos, or maybe one of the upcoming interviews I do with people violates, for whatever reason, their terms of service, then I get a strike. So that is something I definitely want to avoid if possible. All right. Here's something, a repost. The Peruvian Congress has set a date to have public hearings on the study of the Nazca Mummies. So that's going to be held on November 9, 2024. So we're talking in 1 week. We're talking Saturday, November 9, that they are going to be doing this. And that's interesting because the Peruvian mummies, I mean, there have been a number of credible scientists that have discussed their findings of the different mummies that they have analyzed, and they did date them to around 700 AD, and that they believe that these are genuine, that these are not composites, that this is not just something put together in a way to deceive the public. But at the same time, there were some of the mummies that did appear to be composites. So what's going on there? That is probably where you have the intelligence community coming in to muddy the waters, mixing genuine artifacts with fakes. And that is a time-honored way for the intelligence community to create confusion, uncertainty, because once you have a couple of fakes identified in a collection of what otherwise are genuine artifacts, then most researchers will say, oh, well, it's fake. It's proven to be fake. But you only have maybe one or two of the artifacts that are actually fake. Here is an interview I did with, let's see, this is the interview we did in the studio of a Trachea unita that is in Bucharest, Romania, and there we talked about our field work. And this interview, we were being interviewed by a Dr. Marvin, and he was asking us about our backgrounds, our research, and what it was that we discovered there at the Bucegi Mountains. So this is really a good overview of what it was that we discovered when we went to the Bucegi Mountains. Okay, so here's another interview. So we did a couple of interviews there. And this one I did in a studio. This one was done in a studio in Romania, in Bucharest. And this one, again, we were interviewed concerning our backgrounds, our knowledge concerning the exopolitics phenomenon. This is something that we discussed our various books. It's quite a lengthy interview. It goes for 3 hours, and we were interviewed by Dr. Marvin Otoderi. So that's Dr. Marvin, myself, Elena Danaan, and Bruno. He was helping us with getting around in Romania, and he also is one of the founders of the Trachea Unita, which is an organization set up to bring about an understanding of Romania's true history that has been covered up by the powers that be. Okay, so there's the picture of the four of us that were part of this second interview that we did. This is in the studio of a Romanian television station. Okay, so here is something that I just got my attention. This particular statement by the former NSA, that's the National Security Agency director. So let's hear Admiral Mike Rogers, who was a 4-star admiral in the US Navy, Actually, I may be wrong about that. He may have been a 3-star, but anyway, he was a senior flag officer with the U.S. Navy, and then he became a director of the National Security Agency. So let's hear what he has to say about the UFO phenomenon.
The director of national intelligence, James Clapper, calls me, Mike, I need you to go through all of it. I need the team to go through all of NSA's holding all of its files, and I need everything that you have on UFOs. And I'm like, what, sir? You want me to do a review of our databases on UFOs? And I'm literally thinking to myself, is this some kind of joke? But clearly it's not, which is reflected in the question. For a lot of people, this is, hey, what is going on out there? Look, clearly there are phenomena occurring out there that both are visible and that we can't explain. I don't know what causes them. I don't know what they are. I don't know why. I never saw anything in my experience in the government in 37 years, both as an intelligence professional, but also as a senior military individual. I never saw anything that led me to believe that there was some external, i.e. non-terrestrial actor behind this kind of activity. But the flip side is I couldn't explain yet some of the activity. I just don't know.
All right. Well, that was very significant. That firstly, you got the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, wanting to know what the NSA knew about UFOs, and the DNI, the Office of the DNI, was really conducting a fishing expedition to find out what the NSA knew about UFOs, and Admiral Mike Rogers said, well, we don't know anything about it. And so, keep in mind what I said earlier about the CIA counterintelligence being the custodian of the majority of classified UFO files. So that would be the reason why the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, at the time, wanted to find out, what the NSA knew, because the CIA very likely was not sharing information with the Director of National Intelligence concerning the UFO phenomenon. Now, this is where we have to ask ourselves, well, Admiral Mike Rogers, he's just said straight out, he knows nothing about the UFO phenomenon, nothing about these crafts that people are talking about that perform all these incredible aerodynamics and so forth. Well, I think we need to ask ourselves, one, is he lying due to UFOs being part of some unacknowledged special access program, and that he had to sign non-disclosure agreements where part of the security protocols is that you have to accept cover stories or put out cover stories and lie to the public. That's part of the requirements. If you have been read into one of these unacknowledged special access programs, you need to lie to the public. It's as simple as that. So is he lying? Or is he telling the truth? Despite the NSA monitoring of global electronic communications. So the NSA monitors global communications, and if UFOs are being detected electronically, the NSA would be the organization that would be responsible for recording that and then developing intelligence assessments and reporting it up the food chain of the intelligence community. Again, is he telling the truth? Or is he simply misinformed? Was he during his career just misinformed due to the compartmentalization of the UFO phenomenon? That's another possibility we need to ask. There is precedence for this. There was Admiral Thomas Wilson, who was a former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, who in 1997 was straight out lied to when he was informed by Dr. Stephen Greer and Edgar Mitchell about the existence of a classified program that was being run by a corporation. And when Admiral Wilson inquired from this corporation, what do you have? You need to tell me about it. He was denied access, and the corporate attorneys were the ones that were denying him access, and he was eventually threatened that if he pursued the matter, he would end his career would be ended. So is it possible that NSA Director Mike Rogers went through something similar? We don't know. We can only guess. All right, so here is the interview I did on the top of the Bucegi Mountains, right next to this kind of Sphinx-like structure of right there in the Bucegi. I mean, it's called the Romanian Sphinx. I mean, I don't think conventional archaeologists accept it as that. It does have the characteristics of a Sphinx, so it could well be. It apparently was damaged during the Second World War, which may explain why it only looks like a Sphinx from one direction. Okay, so the story was released on my Patreon channel, and then on Monday it was released on YouTube and Rumble. So it does cover what is underneath that area adjacent to the Sphinx on top of the Bucegi Mountains. And Elena Danaan and Corina Pataki did a psychic projection into this underground complex. And what they found was truly remarkable. It was actually more than just a hall of records, which is what was described in the Radu Cinema books, the Transylvania Sunrise series, that according to Elena Danaan, what was found was an ancient Anunnaki laboratory. That was part of this kind of series of worldwide laboratories that the Anunnaki had set up. And she says that she remembered those very clearly from her own past life experience. And there was a recording of the sound coming from underneath. But in this particular interview, we just talked about the psychic projection and the Radu Cinema description of the underground complex there. All right, so here is a story from investigative journalist Ross Coulthard, and he has been saying some. He's been stating his conclusions based on his interviewing of various whistleblowers. And I thought this statement was very appropriate. I mean, it just shows how far the kind of mainstream media has come. I mean, Ross Coulthard was part of the mainstream media. Now he's with News Nation, which in itself is, I think it straddles the alternative and the mainstream news. But Coulthard himself is someone that is a very credible investigative journalist. And his conclusion now, based on his interviews with various witnesses or whistleblowers, is that national security programs actively target, engage, and down extraterrestrial non-human craft, recovering the vehicles and occupants. These retrieved assets are being studied and reverse engineered to develop next generation weapon systems. So, I mean, this is something that Ross Coulthard has taken away from the interviews he did with David Grush and Michael Schellenberger, another investigative reporter. He interviewed also dozens of whistleblowers, and he said that yes, this is exactly what's been going on, that there has been the recovery of these craft, and that some of these craft have been targeted and shot down. So this has been going on for decades now. Now, I think the next step, as many of these researchers explore this phenomenon further, is to go beyond just the downing and the recovery and the attempts to reverse engineer these craft and the occupants. The next step is to acknowledge that meetings and agreements with different extraterrestrial visitors have been reached, and that these are being used to develop classified technology and programs. So this is something that very few researchers, mainstream researchers, and I think Ross Coulthart is among those, have wanted to go there, that they have not really wanted to acknowledge this deeper layer. I think they'll say that, well, it's interesting, but they just haven't been able to confirm it. But the whistleblowers who have come forward to talk about it, they are very credible. Dan Sherman was a former US Air Force cryptologist for 12 years. He was actually an electronics communications specialist. He worked for the Air Force for 12 years, and then he worked for the NSA. And what he encountered at the NSA was that, agreements had been reached between these grey extraterrestrials and the US government. Bill Newhouse, he encountered greys who would come and help help with the reverse engineering of some of the craft that had been retrieved by the US. And Phil Schneider had similar things to say. So there are credible whistleblowers talking about these agreements, meetings that have been occurring between US government officials and extraterrestrials. And so, that definitely, I think it's important that researchers such as Coulthart and others start to explore that seriously. All right, so here is something that I thought it was very interesting. Tyler Rogaway, he is a editor-in-chief of several news outlets. I think the Drive magazine is one of them. The Weapons Zone, I think that's another one. And he specializes in aviation and intelligence. And what he said was very interesting in a tweet or in an X post. Will the first humans to stay on Mars for extended periods live in large caves and caverns? Kind of ironic, but it seems to solve a ton of problems. And, I think he's approaching it from the perspective of someone that's not really familiar with all the literature about secret bases on Mars that date back from the 1950s, that, this breakaway German group established all of that. I think he probably considers all of that just kind of like a conspiracy theory or unsubstantiated conjecture. But nevertheless, there have been some very credible witnesses and whistleblowers who come forward and who have said that, humans have been living on Mars for decades in large caves and caverns. So, he got it right that large caves and caverns are suitable for establishing bases on Mars or finding habitats on Mars for humans that eventually go there. And, of course, this is very significant because Elon Musk did have a conversation with Donald Trump about his plans to have the SpaceX Starships touch down with humans in 2028. And that, in 2026, he's going to send some starships there to land, and they're going to be supplied. They're going to carry supplies and so forth, fuel or whatever. And that the starships that land in 2028, they'll be able to refuel from the earlier starships that landed there and be able to make the return flight to Earth, which would be unprecedented in terms of what is possible using rocket technologies. Now, there have been witnesses, Niara Islay, Tony Rodriguez, Al Bilak, Randy Kramer. They're just some of the many individuals who have been on Mars and say that there are bases already there. So I think given these testimonies from these witnesses, whistleblowers, that when the first SpaceX Starships touch down in 2028, they'll be going where many have gone before. I mean, that is really, I think, what the true situation is going to be. Okay, now here's an interesting development, and this is the former head of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, that's the AARO office, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, and he was talking about some documents concerning UAP recovery. And so this is where, and in this article goes into some depth into some of the documents that have been released. And here's a document that is cited referring to UAP response and recovery and material transfer. So there you have Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick saying that one of the meetings he attended with other organizations that are interested in UAPs did deal with the recovery and material transfer involving UAPs. So this is where we get, I mean, the story. The story is that yes, alien technology has been retrieved, and that at least while he was heading up the AARO office, Dr. Kirkpatrick, I mean, he was, as part of his job, trying to look for cases for UAPs being recovered and material being transferred. That was part of his overall kind of like responsibilities. So there's speculation here as to, why is he doing this? Why all of a sudden, after kind of throwing cold water on the whole idea of UFO recoveries? I mean, when David Grush came out in July of 2023 and said that he was knowledgeable of 40 witnesses that talked about UFO crash retrieval operations and attempts to reverse engineer these, Kirkpatrick, he took offense at this, saying that, Grush is really tarnishing or throwing shade at the AARO office because there was no evidence for this. Now, all of a sudden, you have Kirkpatrick saying that, actually part of his responsibilities was to collect data on UAP retrievals and material transfers. So very interesting. Now, the speculation is that he's trying to get ahead of a release that's coming up. I believe it's going to be November 19, where there's going to be a hearing in the House Oversight Subcommittee for Intelligence and National Security, where they're going to be talking about the Immaculate Constellation crash retrieval program. So once they talk about that, then it'll be in the public sector, and we go this extra step forward in the disclosure process. Okay, so here is a very nice highlights video documentary of the September 2024 Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection Conference, Secret Government Aliens, UFOs, TR3B, Hidden Tech and Medbeds, Galactic Spiritual Informers. So this is a really... Well, let me play the first bit with Danny Henderson, where she introduced
the shadow government globally. Did you know there's a shadow military globally? Did you know there are cures for cancer, diabetes, and other chronic illnesses that have been kept from you? Did you know that there is a secret space program in the military industrial complex on your planet? Galactic Spiritual Informers Connection, or GISIC, brings together the greatest whistleblowers in disclosure on the entire planet to give humanity the truth.
So this is a very nice documentary. I mean, it only runs for 15 minutes. It was prepared by a British documentarian or videographer, and I think it did a great job in summarizing a 3-day event with many different aspects to it. And it was a number of firsts in that. And definitely it is a wonderful event to attend. And I do know that Danny Henderson is planning to do one in 2025 as well. But yeah, this runs for 15 minutes, and I'm sure you will enjoy that. So that brings me now to the final thing I want to cover, which is the monthly briefing that is going to be conducted. So we're just going to put up the banner for that. Jazz, if you put up that banner. Perfect. Thank you. So this monthly briefing, it's going to be held on November 9th, so 1 week from today, from watching this, and it is going to be covering the preceding 4 weeks of stories. I typically give you the top 5 stories over the preceding month. I then go into covering some of the topical events that are happening, and the most topical event, of course, is the US presidential election. So much hangs on the outcome of this election. Its importance for disclosure just can't be underestimated. So I will be talking at length about that in the monthly briefing, and also talking about some upcoming interviews. Now, to watch the monthly briefings, you can do it in 2 ways. One is to become a Patreon subscriber, and that is the Solar patron. So that's the second tier for my Patreon membership. And if you join that tier, it is you get to watch all my monthly briefings, including previous ones, as well as the upcoming ones. And so that is something that is a great deal. I mean, it's only $18, and you get to watch all these monthly briefings, and that also includes all of the interviews that are covered in the tier 1 membership. So effectively you're paying just $11 more, and you get to do the monthly briefing. So I think that's a really good deal. If you don't want to join Patreon and you just want to do it through PayPal, then you have that option as well, and that you will register through PayPal, and you will then have that in your Crowdcast account. So you can just go to I'll put the link in the description for you to learn more and become a Patreon member, or watch it through PayPal. And again, as I mentioned, that's a great way to support Exopolitics today. So I want to thank you for watching this, and I will be doing some more interviews, some important interviews next week, where we do go more into the Bucegi Mountains and what was covered there. So you can look forward to that. So for now, I thank you for watching this, and I look forward to talking to you next week after the US elections, and we will cover that in depth for the week in review and the monthly briefing. So thank you, and aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.